Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's online community forum, Straight Talk. My name is Pam Duncan. I am the President and CEO of Metropolitan Development Council. I am joined this evening with Amanda Westbrook, and we are honoring the space that our colleague Twina Nobles usually holds, but she is on a break during the month of October. We are continuing to partner with Tacoma Urban League for this series of conversations. I will turn it over to Amanda.
Oh, thank you, Pam. Tonight's conversation is 23rd in a series of discussions where we are diving into the different ways that COVID-19 is impacting Tacoma and Pierce County. Tonight, we host a very special candidate forum for the office of Pierce County Sheriff. Our guests tonight include Cyndie Fajardo, and she has said we can call her Cyndie. Thank you so much. And Ed Troyer, who is just now joining us. Pam, take it from there.
Yeah. Amanda, can you believe this is the 23rd episode? Wow. Well, we will be here for the community throughout the COVID crisis with new conversations with a purpose every Monday evening here at 5 p.m. The most important message throughout the series of conversations is that there is hope for our community. Our focus is to create space in each meeting to talk about resources, current events, things that we can all be doing to help get us through this pandemic. Amanda.
We would like to take a moment to acknowledge that this meeting is being conducted on the indigenous lands of the Puyallup people. We gratefully acknowledge that we rest on the traditional lands of the Puyallup people, where they make their home and speak the Lushootseed language. Thank you for that slide. Throughout today's conversation, you can submit questions to be addressed by our speakers using the question and answer function in Zoom. We cannot promise that we will have time to consider every question, but as always, we make our best effort to get through the list in our allotted time. So let's get started, shall we? Good evening to both Ed and Cyndie, and of course to Pam and to Rob Huff, who is our technical director and does an amazing job behind the scenes. I want to check in with each of you, and Pam, this includes you, to see how you are holding up today. And what I mean by that is this: how is your heart? And I'm not going to call on any one of you. I'm going to let your spirit and our silence prompt you when you would like to answer that question.
Well, my heart is full of love. I have a great group of people that are supporting me, and they send me inspirational texts throughout the day to get me through. And we are working very, very hard. And just to know that I have a great group of folks behind me is just amazing.
Thank you, Cyndie.
I'm lucky enough to have a large family between doing foster care and still being in contact with so many people and all the different things I do in the community. I have the same thing. A lot of people stay in contact with me, and I'm sure Cyndie could agree with this. A lot of people contact us when they're having problems. We both stepped up and are willing to lead the sheriff's department, and I think that puts us in a leadership position on its own, on top of the other things that we've both done. So what I've noticed, there's a lot of people out there that are at home and that are hurting, that it's just not normal. And one of the things I always say, it's okay not to be okay. And if you need to talk to somebody, reach out, and things are going to change. It might not be fast. They appear to have been going a lot slower than we originally thought, but let's all hang in there together, help each other get through this, and we'll come out good on the back end.
Thank you, Ed. Pam, that leaves you.
I always feel very privileged to be in the space where I find myself. and being able to have conversations with folks in the community and talk about critical issues. I am also very concerned right now, my heart is, because of the state of our country and how we are, just all of the negativity. I'm also encouraged by so many people who are saying we are better than this. And lastly, I'm also concerned and really want to remind everyone, I'm tracking what's going on with the news, and I am seeing reports that we are entering our third surge of the pandemic, and to encourage and remind everyone to please remember to be careful and to be safe and to do all of those things that we've been taught to do to take care of ourselves during the pandemic.
Pam, you always know how to say the right thing at the right time. Thank you for that. We already have a question in our Q&A, but first, I want to ask this question. And Cyndie, we're going to start with you first. And as the moderator, I will keep this even so you each have a chance to go back and forth. I'd like you to start by introducing yourself, and can you address why you are running for this office and what platform you hope to push forward if you are elected?
Well, I'm Cyndie Fajardo, and I am running to be, of course, your next Pierce County Sheriff. I was born and raised in New York City and made my way out to Denver, Colorado, and then met my husband there, and he moved me out here to this great state of Washington. I'd started my law enforcement career back in Colorado. I spent 4 years as a deputy there, and then came here in 1988 when Pierce County had passed a levy to be hiring a large group of deputies. And so both my husband and I were hired in 1988, and our kids followed us shortly thereafter. And we've made our home here in the south part of Pierce County. We have a little farm with cows and horses, and we've been here ever since. Worked in the Sheriff's Department for 32 years and worked my way through the ranks and through a whole slew of assignments in that time, starting out as a deputy all the way to lieutenant. This is a very trying time in law enforcement, I think, as everybody knows. We need to re-envision how we do our job. We have some responsibility to provide some answers on things that have occurred in recent times, and get more of a community input on how we go forward. And deciding to run for sheriff was as easy a decision as it was a hard decision. It is something that I looked upon for a couple of years, and actually over the course of my career was kind of the pinnacle that I kept my eye on to try to work my way through the department, to have enough credibility and enough experience and enough exposure to be a good leader. And it would be easy to walk away right now, considering that the challenges are difficult, the questions are very hard, the accountability is very challenging. But I owe it to this profession that has given me so many opportunities in my life, my family, my community, to stay and to put my best foot forward to lead the department during this change. And I know that I can do this. I have the tenacity. I have that old New York little fire in me that allows me to maybe be a little bit more curt when I'm addressing people or wanting information. I don't beat around the bush very much. I get right to the point. And I think you need somebody in these times that are just going to go right for it. And I look forward to having that job and being able to bring that to our community.
Thank you, Cyndie. Ed, same question for you.
Well, thanks. And thanks for having us, because without these type of forums, we can't go out and meet with people, and we're not able to do kickoffs or events. So these are great. And I appreciate that you're doing it. I appreciate that people are taking time to tune in and listen to the subject matter. My name's Ed Troyer, obviously. I'm born and raised in the city of Tacoma. I've worked for one department, and that's the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. I was hired when I was 22 years old. I've been on 35 and a half years. I love this department. I love the community. I love the people in Tacoma, and I love our department members. I just I've had a great career. And through my career, I've done many things as well. I've worked patrol for 10 years, 5 years in investigations, and then spent 20 years working with Paul Pastor down in then our command staff down at headquarters. Had, you mostly know me from my public information media job, but also we run the social media aspect of what we do. We also created a very original Amber Alert program that's county-wide, and we now run the child abduction response team and the Silver Alert. So there's a lot of different things that are aspects of what I do through Paul and the command staff. And I've been alongside of him, and I know this department inside and out. Some of the reasons why I think that I would like to lead the Sheriff's Department is because throughout the years, I've been a leader in many nonprofit and charitable organizations. I've run Crime Stoppers for over 15 years. I've been the lead coordinator for Toys for Tots for almost 15 years. I just recently, in the last few weeks, left the Washington State Gambling Commission, where I was a Washington State Gambling Commissioner. And I want to take those leadership qualities that I've built from those organizations and bring them to the Pierce County Sheriff's Department and put the right team in place and lead the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, including the community, bring the community, make the community involved, because that's what I've done for 15, 20 years. Some people call it a hobby, but I've loved doing it. And that's why I've lasted so long in those organizations. And take those skills, bring them to the Sheriff's Department, put the right team in, and let's work with the community, because times are different right now. And what we need to do is we need to learn what people want from their police departments and their sheriff's departments. And we need to be able to provide that. Are there some things that need to go away? Absolutely. Do we do things good? Yes, we do. But are there things we can do better? Tons of things we can do better. And I look forward to doing things better. And I look forward to listening to the community. And I look forward to becoming the leader of this department. Thanks.
Thank you. We have a question from our audience that I want to jump right into, because I think it's poignant, and I think it's one of the most important questions we can ask. And this is the question: to each candidate, what are you doing in your personal life to work to become more anti-racist? For example, what books are you currently reading? And Ed, we'll start with you.
Well, to be honest, right now, the way is how busy it is, I'm not reading any books. But what I can tell you is that in my personal family, I've done foster care. My youngest son I adopted out of foster care is 21 years old. I've had many kids of color throughout the years. I currently have a Black grandson who's 20. I have a Native American daughter, and she's registered Cowlitz. And my wife's Pacific Islander, and her last name is one that you would never be able to pronounce if I was to spell it for you. And so I've been around different types of populations for many, many years. And I can tell you that growing up in having them grow up with me, I've learned a lot. As they get older, I even learn more when they become more self-aware. When my grandson was in school with my foster son, or the same age, same school, same grade. So I got to see a lot, because my foster son's white with blonde hair, my grandson's Black, and they were in the same grade, a lot of times the same classroom, same friends, same sports teams growing up. And I could start seeing, as they got older, issues starting to develop, not between them, they're really close, but how people treated people, and different problems that each of them had, having issues at school. So it was just an actual real life living experience to grow up in that situation. And they taught me a lot, and they still are teaching me a lot. In fact, I have conversations with my grandson that I never thought I'd be having. And sometimes when he tells me things, I really don't understand them until he explains them to me. And coming from an eye of a 20-year-old who's a junior in college is very enlightening. And I'm always open to new learning. I'm always open to new ideas. I'm open to all segments and populations throughout Pierce County. You talked about the Puyallup Indian tribe. I've been working with them for 7 or 8 years in many different homeless capacities. And, they do giveaways all the time. The land of generous people, Puyallup tribe. And I was very proud to find out last week that I have the endorsement of the Puyallup Tribal Police not the police, the Puyallup tribe. I work with the Puyallup Tribal Police, but the Puyallup tribe has endorsed me for the position of sheriff. And we look forward to working with the Puyallup tribe and bringing them on as an advisory to help us understand Native American culture, which they're looking forward to do. So I'm in a position through my volunteering, my leading of nonprofits, and my family members to have been exposed to many aspects and see the changes as they occur. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to bridge the gaps between police and all communities. Thanks.
Cyndie, same question for you, please.
Well, I'll be very honest. I'm not a big reader, never have been. I do read a lot as far as like the internet and going on articles and following up that way. But I can say truthfully, the last time I actually sat down and read a book was probably about 4 years ago. And given the campaign and working and running a farm, I haven't had any time to sit down and even decide what books to read. I do have a list of books that have been suggested me to read that I hope to get to someday. But right now, with, as Ed said, morning to night kind of schedule that we're on for the next 14 days makes it tough. But in my personal life, myself, like Ed, I have a very diversified family. My husband is an immigrant from the Philippines and my children are Filipino. And our friends and family, we have a wide range of diversity amongst our friends. So in my personal life, every day that I wake up, I try to make sure that I treat everybody like I would want to be treated. I know in the work that I am in and driving around in a police car that the portrayal of police to people of color sometimes can bring an angst to them of they're going to get contacted for no good reason. And I can see it. I saw it a couple of weeks ago, actually. I was up in Federal Way and there were two black boys walking along the street and they kept looking back at my unmarked police car. And I rolled down the window and I said, "Nice ride, isn't it?" And so I broke the ice and encouraged them to come and talk to me. So there wasn't this fear factor or this curiosity or them thinking that they were going to get contacted by the police. And so I try to make a good point of that in my personal life. I've experienced what my children have gone through with their encounters with discrimination. My son in high school used to tell his friends that I was his probation officer. So he would have some, I guess, credentials with his friends, or they wouldn't bully him, or they would leave him alone. Obviously, I'm not his probation officer. I'm his mom. Maybe he would have rather been be his probation officer. I'd probably have gone a little lighter on him than I would as a mom. But I think it's a personal decision that you make in how you want to deal with making sure that you are not the cause of racism, that you actually make conscious decisions with that in mind, that people have that sensitivity and take that into consideration in every single one of your encounters. And it's difficult sometimes because I think it's easy to fall back into the norm of what you're used to. So you do have to go out of your comfort level. I have to say that this campaign, one of the biggest things about this campaign that it's taught me is that there are really hard conversations that have to be had out there. And it is uncomfortable to put yourself in the place to have those hard conversations because of course your vulnerability is exposed and your maybe ignorance is exposed, but you don't get anywhere unless you do that. And so I've taken the steps to put myself in those uncomfortable positions so I can become more educated, more aware, and have more empathy to try to be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Thank you, Cyndie. Next question for both of you. What do you see as the biggest issue facing whoever will become the next Pierce County Sheriff? And Cyndie, we'll start with you.
Well, of course, we're going to talk about staffing. We've always been understaffed for quite some time. But one of the issues that I have seen for a number of years in the Sheriff's Department, at least on the law enforcement side of the Sheriff's Department, is that we are not the face of the community we serve. We are not a true representation of the citizens that we go out and serve and protect. We have a better chance of a better number or a better reflection of that on the correction side. And our numbers in diversity are very, very good on the correction side. But when we get to the law enforcement side, we have a very difficult time recruiting Black people, Asian people, Hispanic people. And why is that? Why is the job not inviting for them to come and have a career in law enforcement? And we need that. If we're going to advance in our community, we need to have diversity on our department. We need to have a picture that the community could look up to and say, I feel as though I am part of that police department because they do reflect my community. So as I go into the sheriff's department as the sheriff, and of course, you know, the first few months, you're going to get your feet underneath you, find out exactly what's going on. And then you have to start addressing those very, very tough topics and find solutions. And the solutions can come from within, the solutions can come from the community. There are a lot of intelligent people in Pierce County and have great ideas and great solutions, but we have to be willing to open up and listen to what those suggestions are.
Thank you, Cyndie. Ed, go ahead.
Well, one of the issues, and I agree with Cyndie, it's always been recruiting, and that's not just with our department, that's nationwide. And people just don't look at this job as being the job that they want to go into. What's even worse is I've heard from kids that I've coached baseball with that are white or Black that might be interested in joining law enforcement. And it's not even just the kids, it's the family members and the parents that are saying, no, you're not going to do that because of the way we're portrayed on TV. We have to change that image, and we have to change the thought of us being somewhere where you don't want to work and that we're us against them, or we're never going to get people to come work for us. One of the things that we have done, and we're doing very successfully right now, is that because Bruce Dan Meyer, county executive, and our county council approved 28 new hires for us, we are not defunding at this point. You know, we were underfunded before defunding became, you know, popular. And what we're doing right now is we're trying to hire 28 officers. And just this last week, we swore in 4 officers from the Seattle Police Department, and 2 of them were of color. We did not have to lower standards. We found guys and girls, and we're finding people that are already been through the academy, ready to go to work. And if there's quality people in those areas losing jobs, now's a good time for us to continue to keep hiring lateral transfers that already live down in Pierce County, would love to work here and help us build our department in those numbers and ranks. If I were to become sheriff, what I would do is my staff of 12 people already, I can't tell you who they are because, you know, I don't want anybody to have to explain themselves if this doesn't work out, but 6 of them would be women and people of color. So I would have a diversified staff, and everybody I've talked to along those lines has agreed and looking forward to coming to work. And so we can work together to strengthen our department. I would try and get our people out into the communities more. Unfortunately, with the low manpower, it's hard to find the time to do that. So we really need to find a way to bolster our numbers and make sure that we connect with the community more, which all departments want to do, but we just seem to be running from call to call to call. And right now during COVID, domestic violence is up. A lot of different calls are up. And so we're just staying busy. At the end of the day and into the shift, our people still have calls on the board. So we got to address that problem, and in order to address the other problems. And once we get the manpower to do that, I think that'll work. Also, looking at other ways to include different organizations into law enforcement, social workers for homeless, mental health workers for mental health issues, because our co-responder and those things prove they work. And then, you know, also we need addiction counselors and people that understand addiction, and not just the deputies. It'd be like if a deputy shows up at a major car wreck, yeah, we're trained in first aid, or do you want a paramedic there to take you to the hospital and make sure you're okay? So there's no reason why we can't use people in other fields to supplement what we do. And when we do that, that'll free up more time for police officers to do police work. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed. Pam, do you have a question for our panelists?
Indeed, I do. Thank you, Amanda. So this is Straight Talk, And we talk about hard things. We talk about things that other people perhaps want to shy away from. And we cannot have a conversation about with candidates, especially in law enforcement, without addressing what is happening in our communities these days, as you are well aware. And so we are, I have two questions for you actually. How would you work to address the historic systemic issues with how Black, Indigenous, and people of color have been treated by law enforcement in Pierce County? We know that Black, Indigenous, and people of color are arrested and booked at rates that exceed the population, and in excess of how white people are arrested and booked. So I will go to Troy first, because I think Cyndie actually answered the last question first.
Well, that is true, and that those numbers are up there. A lot of it has to do with the financial paying of fines. As you start looking at the numbers, there's a lot of ways that you can get yourself in trouble with the traffic ticket and not paying for it. If you receive a traffic ticket and you don't pay for it, then your fine triples or doubles. And then you don't pay for that, your license is suspended 3rd degree. And if you don't respond to that, then you are suspended 2nd degree. And then you can go to jail. So basically, we're taking people that might have gotten a speeding ticket and they end up in jail in a criminal matter. And that does affect people of color more, just because the financial numbers are so high. And they are in some of the urban areas. It's been shown that Black people are stopped more. And I don't disagree with that. For traffic violations or minor offenses that can spiral into something that takes years to clean up, if you ever can. I would support a whole entire revamping of the traffic and misdemeanor and citation system. There's no other business in the world that if you don't pay your fee because you bought a new couch or a washer or dryer and you owed money and went to collections, that they would come take you to jail. But yet the state has figured out a way to, if you don't pay your fines, you're going to jail. And that's just terrible. I mean, I've always thought that was inequitable to begin with. And as far as learning, one of the things that having worked with the Puyallup tribe for so long is I was shocked and appalled at some of the things that are in their books. I've read their publications and I've worked with them when we had the fishing wars and the Judge Bolt decision. And they showed me photos of when they took over the hill, the school on the hill where the cemetery is now, police officers standing on bridges in Tacoma police uniforms, literally standing on bridges, using rifle scopes to view people, pointing rifles at people. And I didn't think that was real or that could ever be done. And I couldn't believe that that's actually happened. And it wasn't that long ago. So I've learned how they were treated and how they've been treated and how we can make amends and how we've been able to grow and work together. And we've been doing partnerships with the Puyallup tribe for many years through many organizations. And I'd like to see that in every aspect with every community. I worked with Bishop White on the Hilltop for the last 5 years for Toys for Tots, and he's always quietly been a distribution center for us. And we bring him truckloads of stuff in the holiday season. He gives it away, and it's through his faith organization. And that's another great outlet for connecting and communicating. We don't stay around for that, and maybe we should. Instead of just delivering items and letting different people take care of it, we need to have our people there and talking and communicating so people can see that we're doing the same thing. There's a lot of room for improvement, a lot of ways to learn, and I would look forward to doing those. Thank you.
Thank you. And Cyndie?
I think this goes back to how do we educate our officers, because that's ground zero. So if we talk about the systemic historic treatment of Blacks and people of color, Indigenous people of color, it goes back to the foundation of law enforcement. And so which has always predominantly been white. I mean, clearly, it's a profession that is been white, mostly white men. And we need to change that picture. And, we can read books and we can do training seminars and we can try to educate our officers. But isn't the best education one-on-one experience? I could probably tell you that there are many officers within the Pierce County Sheriff's Department that probably have no friends of color in their circles. Their circles are predominantly white. So how then do you take that and transform that to someone who can have the empathy and understand the struggles and understand the discrimination and understand the injustices that have been put forward in the past? It's by relating to someone who has experienced it. So if we can change the face of the department to expand our deputies to having more diversity, they're going to get that one-on-one experience. They're going to hear the stories about what happened to me when I was growing up. They're going to understand better and create these friendships where they can then understand better the challenges that have been put forward for people who have tried to advance themselves through their life and have been put down, hence just only because of what their color is. It affects your financial situation, it affects housing, it affects the ability to get job, it affects everything. I'm not trying to how would you say, compare it, but as a woman trying to be a law enforcement officer in the early 80s, I experienced some part of that, probably not anywhere to the extent that someone of color has experienced it. But I thought to myself the other day, we had a Black female deputy that worked in Pierce County back in the 80s. She actually was Miss Washington. Her name was Doris Clark. And she went to the sheriff and explained to the sheriff the challenges that she was having, not only as being a woman, but of being a Black woman. And the sheriff at the time was very concerned about her feelings and how she felt she was being treated, and did a lot of things to try to keep her in the profession. But it was just too much for her, and she went on to another profession. It was a tragic loss for our department. She was definitely someone we needed to keep on board to educate everyone about where we needed to go. It was a significant loss for our advancement in this area. And when we talk about a lot of the things that are experienced, it's not just in Pierce County, it's the justice system as a whole. I am an advocate for revamping the bail system. I think the bail system is very discriminatory, especially because you have two people who may have committed the same crime, and hence for just their color and economic situation, they may not be able to post bail. Where if you have a white person who has those resources, they can raise $100,000 with no problem. So they get to stay at home while their trial is waiting to be heard. And yet the other person who may not have those resources sits in jail for the 1.5 years or 2 years, how long ever it takes for them to get to trial. Where's the justice in that? Where's the equity in that? I mean, that's a simple solution that we could do through the legislature on just an economic scale of, what is your net worth and what is your net worth? And this is the crime and this is what the relationship would be. It seems very simple to me. And little things like that, if we can start just chipping away at the little things like that, we can make big strides into having more equity. It's going to take a long time, and we have there's a lot of opposition, there's a lot of opinions, there's a lot of people who will say that they don't believe that they are racist, and truly in their heart they may not be, but by just by certain actions they can be. And as you say, it's a difficult conversation. Is where is it that it's an opinion that is entrenched in their upbringing, and so that they believe they're acting with good heart, but yet hence for one word or two words it changes the whole picture. So and I can tell you, as growing up in New York, I lived in a very, very diverse community. We had Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Blacks, Italians, Jewish, Irish. It was truly a melting pot, and I didn't believe that I had a racist bone in my body. But then you notice things that you say or do, and you go, "Ooh, that probably wasn't the right thing to do or say at the time." And so it's a self-education too, and a self-acknowledgement.
Thank you. I'm going to add follow up in that similar vein with a more pointed question. So again, we are living through a time of civil unrest as many in our community stand up for their rights and make their voices heard. Perhaps you are aware, maybe not, that in Black communities, part of the rite of passage with our children is that parents sit down and talk to our kids about what you do if you ever are pulled over or when you are pulled over by the police, how you are to act, how you are to behave and conduct yourself, because we want our children to come home safely and not in a box. So that's why there's so, and there is obviously something that drives those types of conversations that Black families feel compelled to have these kind of conversations with their children. I can only speak for in Black communities. I'm not aware of what happens in, conversely, in white communities. I believe it's the same in communities of color. So my question to you is, what is your view of the ongoing struggle that we are seeing, especially given what I've shared with you, and especially as it relates to the Black Lives Matter movement?
And who would you like to start?
Cyndie, you can begin since you.
It's a sad state of affairs that you have to have that conversation. And I actually had listened to Joyce Taylor, one of the news anchors, as she had a discussion of the same topic with her co-anchor, and the raw emotion that she portrayed of worrying whether or not when her child went out on a Friday night with friends, if she wasn't going to get that phone call that something happened to her son. And it was such a moving statement of the true fear that she has. And here she's a popular, well-known woman, and raised up, in Fircrest in the Hilltop, and she has grave concerns about the safety of her children. And we shouldn't be living in a world like that in this day and age. We should not be requiring your parents to have that conversation. Is it a fair conversation to have by a parent? I think it is in this day and age, because we're not there yet. I think it's good advice to their children, however sad it is. But we need to move forward, and I believe we have the opportunity now. You know that we've had these conversations in these meetings, and these things have been going on for years and years and years, and we have never had the reaction and the support that we have now to truly hit these things head on. As you are all well aware, the Black Lives Matter movement has had their biggest support base in the last 2 years. The numbers of members supporting it, both Black, white, and whatever color, has increased significantly. There are platforms within the Black Lives Matter that I am 100% behind. I am not behind 100% of their platform, and I've always made that very, very clear. I don't agree with abolishment of law enforcement. I don't believe in defunding, at least as it pertains to the sheriff's department. I don't believe in defunding. I don't think that is an answer. I believe in their platform of being able to have nonviolent civic disobedience to raise awareness of the inequities that are going on as far as police brutality and any kind of racially motivated violence. I do believe that there are places within their platform to redirect some funding to enhance the treatment of issues regarding economic disparity and access to certain benefits that could go forward. But, and again, I think it comes down to, we have to stay on this path, and we have to stay vigilant, and we have to not relinquish what our goal is, to continue making it a better place to live. And it is going to be a long road, and there's going to be a lot of opposition, but every step forward we make is one step forward to a solution.
Thank you. Mr. Troyer.
You're on mute.
You're muted.
I didn't do that. Oh, I plugged in a different cord. I must have caused it. Sorry. So when Cyndie speaks of Joyce Taylor, I went to high school and college and with her, and I'm friends with her, and we've emceed our high school reunions together over the years. And we've had this conversation 20 years ago, 10 years ago, because her being in the news media business and me being in the police end of it, we really came from two different views. And recently I have my grandson, who I told you is black, has been driving since he's 16 years old. He's a junior at PLU now, and he's been pulled over probably 4 or 5 times and gotten tickets 3 times. Whereas my white 21-year-old has never been pulled over. They both drive similar small cars with no tint on the windows, so it's easy. My grandson has more traditional hair. And one of the times he said to me, he goes, "Well, I can't take the black skin off me." So I asked him, I go, "Do you think you're really getting pulled over because you're black?" And he goes, he was delivering sandwiches for Jimmy John's or something and got pulled over a couple times for 8, 9 over. And most all of us know you don't really start pulling people over till 11 or 12, but he got tickets coming out of the same city. It's not Tacoma, and I don't want to name the city, but that made me think, is there an issue here? And talk to him more about it. And he talks a lot about why he doesn't wear plain old white t-shirts and jeans, because it's a stereotype. Should be able to wear white t-shirt and jeans. He plays baseball, so he makes sure that he has his gear on from college to show that he is a baseball player and that he's not out roaming around causing problems. And the fact that he even thought that cops would think that, or others would think that, got me to thinking about a lot of this. And maybe I grew up with them and never saw it because of being too colorblind. But I'm starting to realize there are issues. I'm reading the reports that are coming in. We have the Manny Ellis issue, and everybody knows I'm wrapped up in the middle of that, not our department, but because I was a spokesperson for it. And I'm willing to address that head on, because I have with other people. And looking at it, and it's not just the actual incidents that are happening, it's also the perception, which gets handed down on both sides. And somehow or another, we got to break that. And if there are people that can't break that, then they need to leave our profession. And if there are people that aren't willing to accept that on the other end and try and build instead of tear down, we have a long ways to go. And I hope that's not the case.
So, Ed Troyer, I'd like to jump in here for a moment, because you brought this up, but so did somebody in our audience. And this is the question they'd like to ask you. Mm-hmm. What would you say to a voter who is disappointed in how you portrayed and your department handled the Manuel Ellis investigation?
Well, I would say this. I'm our media spokesperson, and I get there after the calls happen. When I got there, the Tacoma 4 police members were gone from the scene. I've never met them. I haven't met them to this day. I don't know who they were, and I've never, ever had contact with them. What happens is I go out there and talk to the scene commander. What happened? He tells me. Myself and another coordinator, we write up the information that we were told. We have it approved by the detective or person working on scene, and then that's the information we release. And at the time, that was the information I had. We put stuff out in 15, 30 minutes, and we're 7 weeks into the state having it and hasn't put anything out. We try and put information out right up front so people know what happened. At that particular time, there were no shots fired or none of that other stuff that was involved in, because Manny was talking to the fire department when they arrived. The whole thing's terrible. And it turned into that. And then when the medical examiner's office ruled it a homicide, I was never given updated information. I talked to the sheriff about it, and I said, we need to get some information out there. And if you look at our Facebook page, we were the ones that released the photos of the cars that we got at the scene where the witnesses were that never came forward. I said, we need to put those pictures out and see if anybody knows those cars, because we'd already canvassed the neighborhood looking for witnesses. We already had went out there at the same time of night, waiting to see if it was somebody off work to drive by, and we weren't able to do it. So I put the pictures out on social media, and 3 hours later is when the witnesses and that video we first saw. We've never talked to those witnesses to this day. We never got that video. So we had no other information to work on other than what was told to me at the scene. And if we would have had more information, and I'm still willing to be contrite, and if there's something different, say it. I have the entire case ready to go, and I was going to release it to the public and the media, every bit of it, that morning when the prosecutor reviewed it, but then it was handed over to the state. And because of I-940, one of the rules in I-940 is you can't talk about a case if you're not part of it and you're from an outside agency. So I'm now with the will of the State Patrol to finish the case. And I'm still arguing that we should be able to release what our department's investigation was. And I've had the conversation with our legal advisor many times, and I'd like to release that tomorrow so everybody knows every bit of that case to the public and to the media. But unfortunately, I can't do it. And I'm hoping that the State Patrol gets this investigation done soon so we can and they can, so everybody knows all the facts.
Thank you, Ed. Another question from our audience here, and this is for both of you. And Cyndie, we're going to start with you on this one. Many officers involved in shooting minorities claim that they feel, quote, threatened, unquote. How will you take steps to train officers what is actually a threat and what isn't?
Well, I think it's very clear that we do train that right now. But a threat is a personal perception. So why is that officer feeling a threat where maybe another officer may not have felt that threat? And I think that goes back to we have to regroup, and we have to look at the situations that have presented themselves as to what was that threat, and was it truly a threat? And then where was it that the line was crossed where that officer felt that they had to take some kind of deadly force to protect themselves. It's a very difficult discussion because each person perceives things differently. And I can tell you about a situation that I was involved in when I was, I had been on the road probably about 15 years as a law enforcement officer, and myself and another deputy responded to a house where their son was acting irrationally and threatening family members. And when we got to the house, we went to the front door, we knocked on the door came flying open, and here is a guy standing in his underwear, obviously with absolute rage on his face, holding a very large butcher knife in a stabbing manner. And of course, we both took a step back and drew our weapons and tried to, get him to drop the knife. And eventually what he did was just slam the door on us, and then we retreated. And when we talked later, my partner and I, when we talked later, both of us had actually drawn a line in the foyer of the house that if he crossed that line, he was going to be a threat of to us. And I thought it was interesting that both that officer and I had that same barrier of this is our safe zone and this is not our safe zone. There was really no place for us to really retreat because it was an elevated front porch. So we were backed up to a banister. But we have to be able to have officers be comfortable and confident in their abilities. And I have to wonder if whether or not some of the officer-involved shootings are because an officer doesn't feel confident in their own abilities for defensive tactics, their own abilities for retreating. We can retreat. We don't always have to confront head-on a situation. We have that option to regroup, come back, and look at it at another way. And it's very hard to be critical of an officer who, you, especially when you know them, of what their life has been like or what their good intent is when they do become involved in an officer-involved shooting. But we owe it to the citizens to evaluate, where did that line and why was that line drawn? We always present in our training currently different scenarios. We try to cover it as much as we can, but we don't get enough training. We get 8 hours of defensive tactics every year, except for this year, of course, because of COVID. We're not going to have that one-on-one training. Is that sufficient enough for us to be able to defend ourselves without going to any kind of weaponry or things of that sort. So that is one thing that I would like to build within my officers are the options of self-confidence, of self-ability, of proficiency in something other than just their firearms. And that's, of course, going to take them off the street, more time to train them. And then we have the scenario of, are there situations that we're responding to that we really don't need to be responding to? So I think that there's this kind of, how would you put it, a revolving door of why are we even there? So back in 2008, when we had the recession and there were all of these budget cuts and all of these wonderful programs, even some of the great programs we had at the Sheriff's Department were defunded or they went away because of the recession. Those people still needed help and they had no place to go. So where did they go? They went to 911. So just kind of naturally, a lot of these problems fell onto 9/11 to both not only the Sheriff's Department, but also the Fire Department, where they're going to all these mental health calls. And we're not equipped for that. So in the Sheriff's Department, we first started the Mobile Crisis Intervention Team, which brought in a group of trained social workers to deal with prolific 911 callers. And so that took away the need for police or fire to respond to these calls. Some of these people would call 40, 50, 60 times a day. And we had to go out there and do a welfare check on them because that's what was expected at the time. There was no other alternative until the MCERT team was instituted. Now we have the co-responders, which will go with the deputy when we have calls that involve maybe some kind of mental health situation. Can we expand on that? We can. There are a number of different wonderful programs throughout the nation, like Cahoots down in Oregon. Actually, it's in a number of different agencies right now, where it's more of a holistic approach to those calls, and they're screened out at 911 right away. So I think that also contributes to why our officers being put in a position where maybe the uniform is what's just the sheer fact that they're in a uniform is causing the reaction that they're receiving. Where if it was somebody who said, hey, I'm a paramedic, or I'm a social worker, or I'm a mental health provider, or I'm a counselor, where they have maybe already a trust established with a counselor in the past, where they feel that they can de-escalate, which then de-escalates the whole situation. But their experience with a law enforcement officer may be, they're going to put me in cuffs, put me on a 72-hour hold, and I'm not going back to the hospital for 72 hours, so I'm going to fight you. So we have that, those options are in the making right now. They're in place in the Sheriff's Department, and they just need to be expanded. And I think that's going to help and address a lot of these situations that we find ourselves in.
So Cyndie, as a follow-up, and then I want to ask Ed Schroyer the same question here. When we talk about cuts to departments, and you reference those, what would you say to a voter who read the TNT articles about your drug unit being disbanded and you being added to the Pierce County Prosecutor's Brady list?
So I had no say on whether or not the department was disbanded. There was a premise that we were doing something illegal, which was proven not to be the case. And I'm not on the prosecutor's Brady list. I am on the prosecutor's high list, which is a requirement by the courts that if someone has potentially inflammatory or exculpatory information, that has to be disclosed to the defense. And right now that is still being under review because the investigation is still ongoing. I will tell you that my involvement in the situation was for one factor only, and that was a person who was cooperating with law enforcement, who had assisted us with getting over 15 pounds of methamphetamine off the street, had received a credible death threat from the cartel, and I took action in order to avert him being killed by the cartel. And that is about all I can say at this point regarding the investigation because it's still under review. But I've never been accused of or found to have done anything illegal. We've never gained anything personally from anything that was done by the department or by the unit. We didn't take any drugs. We didn't take any money. Our sole mission was to protect someone who was helping us get drugs off the streets of Pierce County so they didn't fall into the hands of your family, my family, young children.
Thank you, Cyndie, for that. And Ed, I'm going to repeat the question here for you. And the question is, many officers involved in shooting minorities claim they feel, quote, threatened, unquote. How will you take steps to train officers what is actually a threat and what isn't?
Well, that all comes down to training, and training has many different forms, and it changes year to year to year on what we need to train on and what we don't need to train on, because it really is something that's adjustable, and we need to be able fluid and be able to move with society. Some things we used to do, we need to stop. Are there other alternatives out there? We need to learn them. I, for one, think that one of the most hostile situations where people come unhinged and cause police and people to have a confrontation is domestic violence situations. And in domestic violence situations, if you look at our homicides this year, 8 of our 11 homicides are domestic violence related in Pierce County, not including the city of Tacoma. These are volatile situations. And if you show up those situations, everybody knows somebody has to go to jail because it's mandated by state law. Maybe there could be an alternative to that, like Cyndie was talking about, incorporating our mental health people. You know, they use jail as a timeout in domestic violence situations. Maybe it shouldn't be jail. Maybe it should be something different, something that looks different. So somebody doesn't believe that they're going to jail and the police are the threat. It could be mental health workers. That program is proving to be tremendously valuable. It goes back to, we should be doing the same thing for not just mental health, but for the homeless and for addiction, because they all drive each other. The mental health and addiction drive each other, and then the homeless commit a lot of crime. Not all people that are homeless, but we have a group called Home Free that are deciding to live homeless because they don't want to pay bills, but they're perfectly capable of changing that lifestyle. It does a disservice to the people that have mental health and alcohol issues that need the support, need the resources, need the professional help. I'd like to see more of all that. And as far as when it comes to race, we just need to learn better. We need officers to learn. We have our own people that can teach us. We have community members that can teach us. We shouldn't wait till it boils over and there's a problem. I've been lucky enough, like I said, of having enough race diversified issues in my family to have learned slowly, but I have a long ways to go. I admit it. And I look out for any chance I have to work with people to try and see the other side. And when we talked about Joyce Taylor, I was kind of shocked that she felt that way. And I'd known her for 30 years until she had a conversation about it. And I think it was just a quiet thing that people have to talk to their kids about how to behave, you know, how to put your hands on the steering wheel, how to keep your hands on the dash, say yes, no, sir, no, sir. And that's a true thing. That's not something that had just recently come up because of Black Lives Matters and the events of the last couple of years. This is stuff that people of color have been teaching their kids for 20 years, 25 years, as far back as I can talk to people. And they've been telling me they've been doing it ever since then. And, you know, to be honest, I had no idea. And I'm a little embarrassed over that. And we need to change that. I agree 100%.
So I want to ask both of you this question, and then I believe that Pam has a question she'd like to ask. And Ed, we're going to start with you. Would you give us an example of when you have stepped in and stopped a situation when someone was being discriminated against or blatantly mistreated?
Well, I have the fortunate ability to have coached sports, basketball and baseball throughout my lifetime. Little kids, teenage kids, and you see a lot of that in sports. You hear, especially from the parents, when some particular kid's not playing and some other kid is playing. And you can tell that sometimes the white parent might think that their kid should play over a black kid. And then you have to tell them this is about talent. At a little age, everybody plays equally. But at a certain age, the talent is what gets you the playing spot. And that's how it is. And if you have a problem with it, then your kid needs to go learn better and not bring it up, because it portrays onto the field and to the kids. In one event, because I can remember myself being, when I was little, just 1 or 2 events like that manifest in front of a kid is going to be something they're going to remember their whole entire lives. And to interrupt that at the very beginning and get everybody on the same page we might not be able to change everybody's beliefs, but I could sure step in and interfere and tell people that's wrong. And if a kid is a victim of that, let them know that it's wrong and that the team and me support you, and that works. So there's no way that this wouldn't work if we took it to another level. If we see something wrong, we do it all the time in law enforcement. Cyndie knows we go to calls when people are victims. And we've both been to calls where people have been victims only by who they are. Nothing more than that. And that obviously is, sometimes it's fun to take people to jail that assault people for no reason. If that's the reason that they're doing it, hopefully it teaches them a lesson. And it also tells people that, hey, we're there to stick up for you. We don't want to, and I don't want our people to decide who gets help and who doesn't get help. Everybody gets help, and we do the right thing. And if we do the right thing, it will prevail, and everybody from every race will be treated fairly.
Thank you, Ed. Cyndie, same question.
Well, I will tell you that I had a very strict mother, and she was very strict on that you will treat people fairly and you will stand up for people when they're not being treated right. And she was a very good example of that. And so the specific example that I can offer happened just a few weeks back. I wasn't feeling too hot and was really very concerned that I may have contracted COVID. And so I had found where the mobile testing site was. It was over on the PLU campus, and I drove myself over there, and they had two lines. One was no symptoms, one was symptoms. And there was an elderly lady standing in the symptoms line. And there was a intake person going down the line of all of those that had no symptoms. And new people were coming, younger new people, healthy new people. And this lady was standing in line in the sun. She had to have been probably close to her 80s. And he would look over and he kept just ignoring her. And in my very good New York voice, I said, hey, I think she's next. And he went to the next person. And I was just appalled by that. And I said, don't make me come out of this line and go over there and get you, but she is next. And so, I mean, it's just mundane. I mean, it's a little just kind of thing, but it was so disrespectful of this older woman. I won't say elderly because I'm getting old too myself, but I find myself in those positions all the time, you know, be it in a store where somebody's not being treated right. It's just kind of the fabric of how I was raised. I think that's part of why a lot of us get into law enforcement is, I think truly our goal is that we want to be there for the underdog. We want to be helpful, and we want to make sure that, you know, that people are safe. Does it go off the rails sometimes? Yeah, it does, when we've seen that. And being sheriff would be one way to try to keep that all on the rails and try to instill that same philosophy to all my officers.
Thank you, Cyndie. Pam, you have a question for our panelists.
Yes, ma'am. And in full transparency, we have a set of questions that we provided to our panelists in advance of this session, and for which they had prepared responses. And I do want to get back to those. And we do have, this is one of the most engaged sessions we've had, where the audience is just plopping questions into the Q&A, and so we also want to honor those. So the most recent question that came up is, what are the best strategies to strengthen the relationship between the police and communities of color, and why do you feel that they are effective? And who answered last? So Cyndie, if you could start.
Well, it's an obvious question. I mean, we have to put ourselves out there, and if we're not engaging, we're not finding the solutions, and we're not finding the answers. We have so many communities within Pierce County that are minorities. We have not only in the Black community, but also in the Asian community and in the Hispanic community, and we have a group called the Community Liaison Deputies, and they work directly with the communities and try to build those relationships to make sure that the community is being heard within the Sheriff's Department. At one point, we had a very good program. It was called the Community Academy, and where we invited citizens into our world to show what it was that we did and how we were trained and experience some of the things that we experienced. And every single person that came from that academy actually had such great compliments about how much they learned and how much insight that they gave to our position on matters and how we conducted ourselves. And that is something I think would benefit both of us if we brought in our minority community groups and held the academies for them. It's an opportunity for us to learn, where we may say, this is how we do this and why, and get a hand raised to say, yeah, but do you know what the ramifications or the effect in our community would be if you did that? So it could easily be a two-way street. We can't get anywhere without the community, because we work for the community. I don't work for the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. I work for the citizens of Pierce County. They get to decide what their police department looks like. They get to decide what programs they want to see within the department. Granted, the council has a lot of say in that because they provide the budget, and at times they dictate where those monies can be spent or have to be spent. But again, the council also answers to the community. So the community has an enormous voice in what services they get and how they're delivered. And it's important for the future for us to build a strong community with the sheriff's office and the people that we serve.
Ed, go ahead.
Well, that's exactly it. I think that we need to do a better job of getting out in the community, and some members of the community need to do a better job of seeing what we do. And that Community Academy was a good program for that. And it sure taught people that it's not what it looks like on TV, that's for sure. And there's a lot of writing and a lot of mundane paperwork and things that go along with this job. And there's a lot of different programs that we have that our people train on, and the amount of training we get. Training could always be adjusted, but we need to be able to be on each other's side and break that wall down in between the two, however that's done. I'm willing to see and be part of whatever we can do to do that. We do that through our different nonprofits and our charities and our foundations. We do it all the time, and it works. We have diversified board members. We work with different groups, and there are a lot of people in this county that represent many different groups, and we need to work with all of them in order to get their trust. And then they need to work with us in order for them to trust us. Like Cyndie said, most everybody gets in this job to do the same thing: help the underdog. We want to help people, and unfortunately, it's really wearing on some of our people, and we're going to start losing good people, and it's hard to recruit right now because they're not feeling supported. So do anything we can do to make our people feel supported, make community members feel safe, and get on a better page of understanding. We had one of our people a few weeks ago that ended up in the hospital and thought they were having a heart issue, and it turned out it was a panic attack. And while the other deputy was there with our deputy, the doctor told him it was a fifth officer from assorted departments that had been in the emergency room with a panic attack in the last 2 months, when you used to have none. So obviously we're feeling it. I know the community is feeling it. People of color are feeling it, and we've got to let the divisiveness go away, take it down, and learn from each other. And I'm a big proponent of that, and I would want our people to do the same thing and try and move forward. I don't know how long it would take. This is obviously something that we're not going to fix overnight, but the sooner we start, the sooner we'll get there.
Thank you for that. We have a couple more questions, and then we want you to be able to spend some time with your families. This question, and we'll start with you first, Ed, in terms of the COVID-19 impact and how it could change the situation on the ground in Pierce County. Our community faces a serious increase in homelessness due to the evictions from the current economy. In your role as Pierce County Sheriff, how would you work with the community to find creative solutions to a drastic increase in homelessness?
Well, the drastic increase in homelessness I see every day just by driving to my office along the streets up there by the Tacoma School District. It seems that there's new tents up there on a daily basis and the other hotspots of where I know people are at. And you're right, those numbers are increasing. The sad part about it is it's going to take a lot of effort from a lot of organizations. It's going to take a lot of effort from the county is going to need to step up. They should right now, because they can do it, is vote and have that 0.1% sales tax for mental health issues. They have not done that, and they can do that now without voter approval. That money could go to address the problem as long as it gets to the root of the problem. It's going to take groups of faith. It's going to take the police. It's going to take everybody that has resources in order to end that problem, because you have a lot of different reasons for homelessness. You have people that can't afford to pay their rent. You have mothers that their fathers have left them and they can't afford it to do it on their own. You have people who've lost jobs. You have mental health. And then you also have alcoholism and drug addiction. You add all that up and it's the perfect storm. So it's going to take people from many organizations, many social organizations, treatment counselors, the police, the community, groups of faith to come together to actually tangibly do something, physically do something, not talk about it, not have another meeting, but have an answer, have the resources, and have the ability for whoever's boots on the ground, not just being the cops, whoever it is, to make the decision without a chain of command, without a big admin structure to take care of people, get them off the streets, get them somewhere, and get them on track. And then on the back end, you're going to have the same amount of services on the back end to help them continue. It's not a matter of taking somebody and finding them a hotel room for 2 days. That doesn't fix the problem. That just fixes it for the night. So it's a long-term problem. It's going to take long-term solutions. And I would be willing to be part of that in any shape or form, because it makes me sad to see those people that many people that are homeless. When I grew up in this town, and you would never see any. And now the numbers, they're just everywhere, under every bridge, under every tree, under any spot where you can pitch a tent, there are people. And we can't let it go on like that.
Thank you, Ed. Cyndie, your response?
It's not a new issue. It's been something that's been going on for a number of years, and it's been increasing and increasing. Probably back in about 4 years ago, actually not even that long ago, about 2 years ago, I took part of the League of Women Voters Homelessness Collab. And it was a 3-day brainstorming session on how do we deal with homelessness. And there were people within the panelists that they didn't disclose to us were actually homeless people, and until we were well into the discussion. And one of the biggest issues that they had was there was no centralization of services. So by the time that they were able to get a bus pass to go to one place to try to get services, and were told that that's not where they needed to go, they had to go to another place. It was another hour bus ride. And then they stood in line, and then they were told, no, you have to go here because you live in this area. And I was very proud of the work that was done by that collab, and very disappointed that none of the suggestions were ever implemented. It is a very comprehensive analysis of what the root of the solution could be, what needs to be in place before we can start addressing the true homelessness issue. And it's still out there. I mean, the results and the suggestions and the plan forward is still out there, ready to be used if somebody will just pick it up and start putting it into play. We are going to have a significant issue come January if the moratorium does not continue and we have these evictions start. We have people right now that are struggling, even just to try to put food on the table. And the subsidies, they help. But they're living hand to fist. They don't know where their next paycheck's going to come. Winter's coming, so now we have the whole heat issue and how to stay warm. We're going to put these people out in January in the middle of winter on the streets. We have a number of people right now that are on the streets that are going to work every day, have a full-time job, and they leave their full-time job and they drive to a parking lot and they sleep in their car and they get up in the morning and try to find a place to get ready for work so they can go back to work. There's no places anymore because all the restaurants have closed, all the fast food places, you can't use the restrooms, so they can't even like prep themselves for work. And that's happening right now. What are we going to see in January? The one big thing I want to say about homelessness is not a crime. Homelessness is a social issue that has to be dealt with by a number of different entities. And to look and treat a homeless person like they are beneath us or the dirt of society is very disturbing. They are there for a number of reasons, and it could be just the fact that I couldn't make this month's rent, or I have a mental health issue and I don't have any family who's going to support me, so I'm on the streets, or I'm a drug addict and I just don't know where to go to get treatment. There's a lot of programs that are out there, but it's going to take every single one of us in every single one of our professions to help these people get on their feet, because they're not contributing to society right now, and we want them to contribute to society. Now, for those who want to be homeless, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. That's a decision that if hopefully they're making with a sound mind, that that's the life that they want. They want that nomad's way of living. But we have a solution out there, and it just needs to be taken into consideration and implemented.
Cyndie, thank you for that. So my last question for both of you, and Cyndie, I'll start with you. Where are you finding hope right now? Because as Pam said when we opened, we always find hope.
I have to say that I am finding hope in every single one of these discussions that I'm having. I learn something new every time I am on one of these Zooms. So in some way, although the campaign has been quite challenging and not anything close to what I expected to be, I have met some tremendous people that have opened my eyes to things that I wasn't aware of. I find hope in the dedication of the people that I've met over the past 3, 4, 5 months that are willing to take time out of their personal lives and move suggestions forward and ask the questions, ask the hard questions, demand the answers. I find hope in the fact that we're making progress, although slow. I'm hopeful in the fact that my grandson, who is a Samoan Filipino, that he potentially now has a future because people are starting to recognize what the issues are, and that we have to make a change if we're going to have a society where we can all thrive and that we can all be recognized for who we are and what we can contribute.
Thank you, Cyndie. Thank you very much, Cyndie. Ed, where are you finding hope?
Well, I find hope, the same place I have for many years, even when other things have gone sideways, and that's through the nonprofit and charity work that I'm fortunate enough to have done my whole entire life. And I've become the leader of 3 or 4 of the largest organizations in Pierce County that are all volunteer organizations. And foster parenting and the FPAWS Association, I've been teaching classes with them for years. I've been honored to be the MC at the recognition dinner the last 5 years. And I get to see 400 or 500 foster kids at a convention with their foster parents. And that is an organization, when you see a foster parent have mixed race kids, and it's never an issue. It's never even talked about like, oh, look at, you have an Asian kid or a Chinese kid or a black kid. That's not even a conversation that comes up amongst anybody. It's very colorblind organization. And it's very enlightening to see how everybody encourages each other, and in the classes and the training classes and the kids that make friends and the parents that make friends. It's a selfless organization, but one that needs to be done, and there's a lot we can learn from them. Same thing with my Toys for Tots. Most of my volunteers that work in the warehouses are military, and they come from all races, and they come from not just the Marine Corps League. We have Navy and Army down there too. And it's not the color that they argue about, it's the branch of military that they argue about. And those are real life things, and those are real good examples that there is hope out there. I'm lucky enough to work with a lot of groups to see that there's hope out there. I'm lucky enough to be educated by my own family members of things that happen, or when I say something dumb unintentionally, they'll correct me and school me on it, and that's okay. And I think that if everybody were to have an open mind and move forward, that it would make a huge stride in putting everybody on the right path.
Thank you. All right, Pam Duncan, as I always say to you, drive us home and tuck us in for the night.
Well, first, I would like to thank both of our panelists in our discussion tonight. This was a very engaging conversation, and we have lots of folks who might not hear from you in any other venue be able to weigh in. So thank you so much for making the time. Thank you. I'm fading fast. I really have been sitting at the computer all day. I just want to thank everyone who either watched via the Zoom call or on Facebook for participating and leaning in and all of the questions that were posed. And that is my cat, who is letting me know that it's time for me to wrap it up. She's tired too. So I just want to say again, thank you everyone. And we look forward to seeing you next week for another candidates forum on Straight Talk. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.